Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 6. This is of our series, How to Steer Your Brand Through Turbulent Times. So this week we're going to do another What's Stopping Us session. So we're going to talk about what's stopping you staying visible. And as usual, what I've done, I've sort of gone out to my network and brands and really talked about some of the challenges that brands are facing in being visible at this time. So that's what I'm going to do this week. Um, I wanted to first talk about visibility and the nature of visibility because I think there's some confusion and maybe a little bit. Maybe we've lost sight of what visibility is, particularly in this time. And I think the biggest thing about visibility, obviously, it's about us being out there. But visibility isn't just about us being out there. It sounds obvious, but visibility, it's all about the ability of our audiences to see, hear what we have to say, and appreciate it too. And I think that point and making sure that we're keeping our audiences in mind rather than just focusing purely on us getting ourselves out there and cutting through and standing out and all that sort of thing is really important, particularly at this time. And where I see brands maybe, getting it wrong or struggling with this is because actually they're not having that audience mindset in mind. And as I said last week, it's not necessarily about mass reach. It's about reaching out and engaging the people that really need you the most. So what I'm going to do this week is, in terms of what's stopping us from being visible, from staying visible, I'm going to look at it from two sides, the barriers. One is about the barriers from an audience point of view, and the other one is obviously about barriers stopping us. And what I've tried to do is identify common themes across both. Now, as always, do feel free to comment in the live chat and also ask questions as well, because that's really cool. If you do, I'll spend some time just unpacking these three themes that I said I'd talk about from an audience and an us point of view, and then we'll come into more questions. I've actually got two pre sent in before questions as well to tackle, so we'll talk about that too. So back to what's stopping us staying visible, and three barriers that are barriers both from an audience and from an us point of view. First one is noise. I heard a wonderful word last week, which I think I mentioned to you, which was infobesity, right? Infobesity is a time of infobesity, people gorging themselves on just too much information, often from the wrong sources, and it's making us really unhealthy. So in a time of infobesity, and just generally the amount of noise out there, this is a barrier in terms of visibility from an us point of view, because we can feel like we don't want to add to it. But it's also a real barrier from an audience point of view as well, because I think whereas people are still, don't get me wrong, people are still hungry for information, but people are starting to realize that all information is not good. All sources are not good, and we really need to make sure that it's the right information from the right sources. So this kind of noise, and this noise is just a real barrier in terms of it's something that's stopping us being visible, because it's something that's stopping our audiences from engaging with us, and it's also maybe inhibiting us. So I think one of the ways we can overcome this is honestly, even though there's a lot of noise out there and a lot of, as we said, people are really like, there's a glut of information, is really remembering a couple of things. Firstly, let's not let this inhibit us, because there are some things that we as brands, as individuals, really have to say and are incredibly knowledgeable, and people really need good information at this time. So I've come up with a couple of criteria, and people are still definitely hungry for information. It just needs to be authentic information from the right sources. So for us, I think about kind of a few criteria when I'm thinking about information I'm putting out there. The first one, and I've talked about this, is it genuinely helpful? Is it genuinely helpful to people right now? Is it relevant? Is it relevant now? Is it good information? So a bit like, obviously a bit like, bad food can cause obesity. Bad information causes infobesity, a glut of too much information and just people getting gorging on it, and it really being unhealthy. So is this good information that we're providing? And finally, is it from a trusted source, or are we a trusted source in order to convey it? And I really like those criteria when I'm thinking about the information I put out there, on a personal level, but also on a brand level too. So again, is it helpful? Is it relevant? Is it good quality? And good quality doesn't just mean in terms of source. It means in terms of execution. Is it something that's entertaining? Have I made sure it's engaging? Have I, played to my strengths in terms of the platform I'm using? Do I understand how to use this platform correctly? And finally, is it trusted? Am I a trusted source, or am I referring to or leading people to a trusted source? So those are the ways we can cut through noise at this time, is really by making sure that we're looking at this from our audience's point of view and answering those criteria I just talked about. So second barrier then, timing is a biggie, right? And timing acts as a barrier to us being visible on two levels. One is because at the moment, and I don't know how you feel about this, but particularly, I guess, for small businesses and maybe small organizations, it can feel like it's never the right time to go out and talk about stuff you're doing, because, it's a global pandemic after all. People have much bigger things to think about. But if everybody thought like that, actually, we would just stop directing to people to the stuff they really need. So we really need to not let the time stop us and inhibit us from getting out there and being visible. But from an audience point of view, there's also a real thing around timing. Ill-timed communication, it can go work against all those criteria I talked about before. So it feels really unhelpful if you receive kind of ill-timed communication. It can feel incredibly irrelevant, and it just generally falls flat. I don't want to inhibit you at this point by going, actually, this is why timing is, but timing is everything. And actually, what we're seeing is, and I'm really observing this trend on any number of things, and I talked about it last week, is that people's expectations and needs are shifting really on a week by week basis as we move through the different stages of this pandemic. We move through crisis, and as we start to sort of think about other side and what this looks like, and we're certainly seeing a transition. So it's really important we, from the point of our audiences, understand that transition, so we work out, of course, we can stay visible and we can keep visible, but we're really making sure that we're relevant and appropriate at each point. So things that were really relevant in week 1, now we're into week 6, 7, 8 for some people, are just not appropriate now. And I'm seeing this especially in TV advertising, and I talked about this again last week, but it hasn't gone away, in that because of the lag in advertising production, you're seeing brands come out with things now are kind of, oh, we're here for you, we're all in this together. Quite empty big messages, and just showing scenes of people in lockdown that aren't necessarily appropriate. And certainly, I guess, it's one of those things that slice of life advertising is like a staple of how to advertise to people. And I used to work in advertising. It's one of our things. So slice of life means literally taking a slice of someone's life, showing it, and then showing how your brand works within that. Obviously, it makes sense. It's completely relevant. The problem with slice of life advertising, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, but what we're being presented with is just a whole set of video calls and showing people on Zoom interacting with their families. And in a time when our worlds have got smaller, our worlds have shrunk, I just don't think we need to see that on TV without a call to action on the other side of it. So, for me, the timing of this stuff in week 1, possibly other people's Zoom calls and that's it, and saying, yay, don't worry. No, not good enough. So actually, we really need to think about, really thinking about the timing of our communication, even if we're doing stuff that is going to go out in a few weeks hence. Now, one of the things I've heard is that people are finding planning and future looking quite difficult because we don't know what's happening. And yeah, I agree, it is difficult, but we do have a couple of advantages, and I talked about this last week. The first one is we know our audiences, and if you don't, you need to get to know your audience. Think about who you're talking to. The second one is we know why they need you, why your audiences need you. So actually from there, and if we're listening and we're staying in touch, which is we have a really good opportunity to understand what they need right now from us. And those three things mean that we should be able to be visible to them and understand how it's going to land at various points. And if we don't necessarily know what that looks like, just making sure that we're, sticking to those criteria that I've said a week in terms of brand behavior, leading with empathy, being generous, and generally trying to foster a sense of community, we won't go far wrong. So even if you are having to do stuff that's a little bit along the way, or you can't really, predict what that looks like, you can still make sure that your way you're being visible is really timely to people too. The other thing I would say, the other bit of advice I'd give in terms of this timing being a barrier, is make sure you leave room for adaptation, evolution, and to make sure that you're driving people to places where you can consistently update and respond and be much more responsive. So from a TV advertising point of view, if I was still working in my old job, what I'd be advising my clients to do right now is go, actually, if you want to do brand advertising, great, but let's make the call to action. Let's drive people to a channel or a forum or something that we can keep regularly updated, that we know we can provide up-to-date help, that we know we can provide up-to-date information. So even if we're being quite big and open in our messaging, from a TV point of view, we're driving people into channels that can, we can respond to. So I hope that is useful. I've used TV as an analogy. Obviously, many of us, if we're smaller, we don't have the budget for TV ads, but it's still a useful content to think about. Evergreen, they call it evergreen content, which is stuff that no matter what time it is going to be consistently relevant. And then driving people to a place where you can talk about stuff you're doing for them right now. So the third barrier is authenticity. And I said to you, I call it the A word, because I really hate people just bandy around, be authentic, it needs to be authentic, without any sense of what it means and really understanding. So we've talked about this when we talked about how to stay true. Authenticity is all about being true and staying true to who you are and what you stand for, no matter what. And being able to deliver and live that consistently over time. That's what authenticity is. So, you need to understand it. So why is it kind of a barrier? Why is it stopping people from staying visible? Well, in this time when we're having to adapt to quite rapid change, it can feel like we don't necessarily know how to be ourselves and remain true to ourselves and do that. So that stops people wanting to be visible. And actually, one of the questions I received this week was on that topic. So I'm going to talk about that in a bit. But I guess the thing is that and authenticity is also, if we don't get it right, it is a barrier to our audiences in sort of, us being visible to them, because they just won't recognize us if we're doing stuff that's wildly different, and they certainly won't buy into it. So that's where I talked about last week, the importance of really understanding who we are. So really going back to our purpose, really understanding our values, thinking about how we can let our personality shine through. And I talked about that in my, I've just done a 3 tips videos as well, because I think it's really important. But actually, if you are truly, if in order to stay authentic, it's really thinking about, what's my purpose? What are my values? And how can I help people right now? I've used this word help a lot, because I think that's the core to really being able to be visible. It's not enough just to get out there and broadcast out messages. We really need to add value. And that starts with this very simple question: how can I help? How can I help? How can we help? How can we help as a brand? So those are the 3 sort of barriers that we talked about this week in terms of what's stopping us staying visible. The amount of noise, the amount of, the timing of things and wondering whether the timing's right. And then, the fear around being authentic. What I would say is that, in order, the answer to all of them in terms of these being barriers, overcoming it, being helpful, really understanding our audiences, and then making sure that actually we are connected to our very values and purpose and don't lose sight of those at this time, will be the things that will help us get over the hump of being visible at this time. So I'd love to hear what you think. I've got 2 questions that I've been asked throughout the week that I'll use to kick this off. So the first one is, links to this point around authenticity we just talked about, is that at this time, many businesses are having to pivot and adapt what they do quite significantly, maybe do stuff in a totally different way. And if that's the case, I got asked this week, when should I go out there with something, or when should I, should I hold off being visible, or can I take a step back until I've successfully sort of pivoted? And when I'm in the middle of a pivot, should I be really trying to be visible at this time, or should I just be doing this stuff under the radar? What I would say is, I think visibility at this time is sort of a key, a must. But as I said, it's not just about mass reach, and it certainly isn't about broadcasting. It's all about helping the people that need you the most to see what you have to offer and make sure you're there for them at this point. So with that in mind, if you're pivoting, if you're in the midst of pivoting and you're trying new stuff, it's kind of up to you when you go out there with it and sort of kind of raise that. And it's kind of up to you in terms of when you're comfortable with it. But I would say there's a couple of different approaches you could take. The first one is you can go out to your warm audiences, being clear this is something you're trialing, because in trialing stuff, your warm audiences are the ones that will, they have a close connection to you, so they'll really get you. So if you're trying to try something new, you can kind of go out to them, explain why you're doing it and what you're trying, and get, their feedback on it and get them to engage with it. Or if you're pivoting and you're trying to reach a specific audience, you could really focus in on activities that target that audience quite specifically and in a quite a niche and targeted way, so that you're not necessarily talking to everyone about this pivot you're doing, because it's just not relevant to everyone. And that, that relevance point we talked about is super important. So you're talking very specifically to an audience that is going to benefit from and need this thing now. And either way is fine. Either way counts as being visible, because we talked about visibility, not mass, being, standing out to the people that need you the most. And so hopefully that answers the question and that helps. The second question I've been asked a lot, and I did reference this last week, was what if, I'm sorry, my glasses are skewed, so I'm just going to do that because it's annoying me. What if I can't deliver my product or service right now? What's the point in being visible? Should I just, get under the radar? And again, I talked about this last week, so I used the example of my local pub, if you remember, who are really using this time to reach out to their local audiences and regulars and just provide activities that keep us connected to the pub and staff, even if they're not physically, the door's not open. And I think that's a really good approach in terms of, again, if you can't deliver your product or service right now, and you do have capacity, you are able to still, kind of reach out and engage with your audiences. I would, because people will want to hear from you. They'll want to hear that you're okay and what's happening, and they'll want to understand maybe what's going to happen next for you. And they also might want to offer help. So providing an avenue of communication between the people, your closest audiences, and it is really important right now. So I would say yes. If even if you can't deliver what you do, yes, do stay connected with people and find relevant ways of engaging with them. Because actually, even if you can't deliver the product or service, there'll be knowledge, there'll be contacts, there'll be stuff that you have that you can still communicate with people. And it's good to work out how you can do that while people are at home and not able to physically interact with you or your product or service. So they're my two questions. I'm looking in the chat box. I can't see any. So what I'm going to do now, there's just a couple of things. I'm going to kind of wrap up. The first thing is thinking about, us helping brands steer through this time and understand it. We've come up with a couple of maybe new ways of delivering our work that are quite specific over this time. So the first one we're doing is some short, sharp strategy workshops. What are they? They're 75-minute workshops, so really short, over Zoom, hyper engaging, hyper focused and it's all about helping you as organizations, as brands, really embed, consider, think about and reflect on, one, the positive impact you're having right now, and two, the stuff that you've done really quickly and potentially you might want to take forward. Because actually there'll be a time, and I think the time is starting to come now, where we move out of reaction mode and are really starting to look to embed some of the good stuff that's happening before we forget about it and just go back to business as usual, or business out the other side of this, even if it's not as usual, whatever business looks like coming out the other side of it, we'll get bombarded with a whole new range of change and need to be reacted. So it's really important. We've embedded some of the stuff that we've learned that's been really positive. We've tackled some of the challenges we're fighting now before we move forward. And that's exactly what our short, sharp strategy workshops are designed to do. So if you're interested, head to our website, brandbyme.co.uk. You'll see, if you scroll down on the homepage, there's a little section there on it, and you can click through and find out more. The second thing, and it's again another aspect of brand we do, and I referenced this, we do quite a lot of work with individuals on personal brand. So right now I'm running one-to-one deep dive sessions on personal brand, designed to help leaders, to help individuals, to help change makers and trailblazers like you guys really understand what your personal brand is in terms of your purpose, personality, vision, and values. But most importantly, really deep dive into what that means in terms of how we drive change, how we want to act, what we need to do now, and again, how we can lead those around us and ourselves through this crisis. So if you're interested in that, again, head to our website. I think it's under services right now. If you can't find it, the easy thing to do, email hello@brandbyme.co.uk, and I will respond and tell you more about that if you're interested. But they're just a couple of things we're doing beyond these lives to really deep dive and help on a very bespoke basis people steer their personal brand and organizational business brands through this change. So that's it. Again, thank you so much for being with us. And do share with people that you think can benefit from this. I've also done a little summary video. If you look in the YouTube channel, you'll see I've done a summary video with 3 learnings from all the episodes we've had to date. So actually, if you don't want to share a full episode, because I recognize 20 minutes is a commitment, and I love the fact you've made it, so thank you. If you want to just share the quick top 3 learnings, there's a YouTube video there that I would love it if you could share and direct people to. Again, and do, if you haven't already subscribed, I'm sure you have because you're here. But thank you so much for joining. Next week, we're going to be talking about how to speak up and speak out, because this is one of the things. I did a workshop, facilitated like an online event workshop, and with a number of charities specifically. But I think this is something that people are finding, is that in the midst of this pandemic, there are other things we need to talk about that are really important issues we need to raise and we can't lose sight of. And actually, maybe it's something around how do we talk about those? How do we speak up? How do we speak out in these times when actually, it can feel like, oh, it's not appropriate. We're in a global pandemic, don't you know? And there is a way to do that. So that's what I'm going to be talking about next week. That's it. It's a bank holiday here today, so thanks for joining. Have a fantastic sunny weekend. Stay in, stay safe, all that sort of thing. But by all means, thank you so much for joining, and I hope this has been really helpful. If you do have questions after today, don't worry. Either email hello@brandbyme.co.uk, or you can comment on the video when it goes up, because I do normally see them even after we've closed the live stream. But that's it from me. Have a great day. Bye.